Welcome to Session 4, Week 6. This session will be about the mass production of popular imagery through photography and print media in early modern Korea. Let's begin. The mass consumption of photography and print images was relatively late to develop in Korea. Due to budget constraints, printers for stamps and postcards were not imported until 1898. From 1900 onwards, the production of postcards was largely undertaken domestically under the supervision of Japanese technicians. In particular, mass-produced picture and photographic postcards emerged as one of the most popular commodities in the early 20th century. This was made possible as a number of private and Japanese printing houses increased. The influence of Japan in all aspects of society, including the production of print imagery, continuously increased from the onset of the 20th century, and both mass print media and consumerism experienced a major growth under Japanese occupation. One of the most popular types of images circulated in the early 20th century were those of the capital city. Early pictures of Seoul taken by Western visitors in the late 19th century were mostly taken back to Europe or the US. Many images of the capital that were consumed by the Korean public in the 20th century, on the other hand, were mostly produced and sold by Japanese photographers and vendors. The transformation of Seoul from Hansong or Hwangsong to Gyeongsong during Japanese colonial rule drastically reshaped its identity. Japanese authorities altered key spaces in Seoul to present Gyeongsong as a modern, improved city, distinct from its past as a capital of an underdeveloped Korea. Major changes were made to the city to exert Japanese dominance onto Korean society and to assimilate Seoul to the Japanese Empire. This included the construction of the Government General Building in Gyeongbokgung Palace in 1926 and the conversion of Changdeokgung Palace into Changgyeongwon Park in 1911, which featured a zoo, botanical garden, and museum. The Hwangodan Altar was also demolished to make room for the Chosun Hotel, part of the 1915 Chosun Industrial Exhibition. Postcards of the new capital city emerged as effective mediums for imperialist propaganda after 1905. Photographic postcards played a pivotal role in commercializing and commodifying the image of Gyeongsong, often depicting former royal spaces like Gyeongbokgung Palace as casual entertainment areas. These postcards cemented and visually underscored Japan's colonization of Korean symbolic spaces. Once sacred and authoritative sites like Keunjeongjeon Hall and Injeongjeon Hall were reduced to historical relics for public consumption, stripped of their former significance. These changes reflected Japan's broader effort to assimilate Seoul into its imperial territory, redefining the capital and its central palaces as a relic of Korea's past rather than a symbol of sovereignty. It also promoted consumption and tourism in Korea, which became a major source of revenue for the government general and Japanese corporations during the colonial period. One of the most popular and revered tourist destinations outside of the capital was the Kumgangsan Mountain. Located in Gangwon-do Province, the mountain had historically been regarded as the most beautiful and spectacular sight in Korea, often depicted in landscape paintings and written about in poems. Even Western visitors to Korea traveled to the mountains and took photographs and sketches. In the 1910s, Japanese authorities viewed Kumgangsan Mountain as a profitable opportunity for colonial exploitation. During this time, Japanese photographs and photo postcards became the dominant imagery associated with the mountain. Notably, photo albums began to be created in Gyeongsong and Wonsan, with Dokjeon Photo Studio publishing the Kumgangsan Sajinchop in 1912. This best-selling album featured numerous photographs of the mountain, along with brief descriptions and a tourist map. As tourism to Kumgangsan became more accessible due to the completion of the Gyeongwon-san Line Railroad from Gyeongsong to Wonju in 1914, various promotional materials emerged. Many Japanese publishers, including the Joseon Government Railway and Wonsan Tokuda Photo Studio, produced guidebooks showcasing photographic images of Kumgangsan Mountain and other popular sightseeing spots in Korea. The South Manchuria Railway and the Railway Bureau of the Japanese Government General even commissioned renowned artists to create paintings of Kumgangsan Mountain, organizing exhibitions in the 1910s to attract visitors. Japanese promotional materials for Kumgangsan Mountain often suggested that while interest in the mountain had waned during the Joseon period, the Japanese were responsible for its revival as a national landmark. This narrative was part of a broader strategy to commercialize the mountain and reframe its cultural significance within the colonial context. As more artists and foreign travelers began to produce images of Kumgangsan Mountain from the early 20th century, representations diversified across various media, including traditional ink painting, watercolors, prints, and photography. By the late 1910s, a blend of Western and Japanese styles were also used to depict Kumgangsan Mountain, as can be seen in Lillian Miller and Elizabeth Keith's woodblock prints. For those who could not afford to travel to Kumgangsan Mountain, purchase original paintings or expensive photo albums, reproductions of photographs and paintings in print media were both attractive and entertaining. In 1915, 매일신보, a government-general-issued newspaper, published a series of articles titled 동양명승 금강산, highlighting the mountain's beauty, often accompanied by photographs. Kim Gyu-jin also published his own sketches of scenic spots in Kumgangsan Mountain in a series of sketches in 매일신보 from 1919 to 1920. The influence of photography and Japanese-style sketches can be clearly spotted in the images, and several sketches resemble the layout of popular photo postcards of the time. The number of photographs of Kumgangsan Mountain also surged as travel to the site was improved and more tourists hired their own photographers. The Japanese administration began to issue picture postcards toward and after annexation as both an appeasement strategy and an assimilation policy. Photo postcards were printed to commemorate Ito Hirobumi's consecutive appointments as Resident General in 1906, and the Residency General and the Government General went on to release a total of 26 official postcards by 1935. Among these, 12 were produced as annual celebratory postcards to mark the annexation and the establishment of the Government General, highlighting the highly political nature of these postcards. However, following the March 1st movement in 1919, the Government General became increasingly wary of the public's desire for independence and grew skeptical about the effectiveness of using postcards for colonial propaganda, celebrating the establishment of the Government General. Several popular visual elements were repeatedly employed in these postcards. The Taegukgi and Ihwamun were prominently featured in celebratory postcards to highlight the protectorate relationship between Korea and Japan from 1905, often displayed alongside portraits of the royal family or in conjunction with the Japanese flag and chrysanthemum emblem. This combined use of the Japanese and Korean flags became particularly noticeable after Sunjong's accession and the visit of Japanese Crown Prince Yoshihito to Korea in 1907. A series of Japanese picture and photographic postcards showcase the flags and emblems of both nations, accompanied by portraits of figures such as Sunjong, Gojong, and Ito Hirobumi. During this period, the Ihwamun became closely associated with Sunjong in postcards and photographs. The emphasis and strong association of the Ihwamun as Sunjong's emblem was designed to diminish his authority as ruler of an independent nation-state. The Japanese endeavored to diminish the political status of the Korean monarchy by explicitly renaming the imperial family as the Yi royal family, integrating them into the Japanese extended royal family. In visual representations from the 1910s, the Ihwamun was increasingly utilized as a family emblem, thus losing its stature as a national symbol post-annexation. The integration of both Taegukgi and Ihwamun imagery into Japanese colonial symbolism intensified with the production of annual commemorative postcards by the Japanese Government General from the time of annexation in 1910. This marked a clear hierarchical relationship between the Japanese Empire and its colony, illustrated by the combination of portraits and flags. In postcards celebrating the 1910 annexation, the merging of the Korean Taegukgi with the Japanese Hinomaru symbolized complete colonization. Notably, the visual similarities between the Taegukgi, Ihwamun, and Japanese symbols facilitated this merging. efforts to visually distinguish Korea from China and assert its autonomy by adopting the Taegukgi design over the dragon flag and creating an imperial emblem reminiscent of Western symbols of authority, ironically made it compatible with Japanese symbols, enabling a seamless visual integration of the two nations' identities. Despite colonial oppression and censorship, images of Korean resistance against its colonizer were also mass-produced and disseminated. These images mostly depicted heroes and martyrs who sacrificed themselves to fight for Korean independence. A key aspect of resistant nationalism during the early 20th century in Korea was the concept of martyrdom. After the signing of the Ulsa Treaty that forfeited Korean diplomatic autonomy to Japan in 1905, activists engaged in both literary and physical resistance against Japanese colonialism, with martyrs gaining significant public support. Notable figures like Min Young-hwan and An Jung-geun became especially revered due to their heroic deaths and their efforts against Japanese repression. Portraits of these martyrs helped immortalize their sacrifices and stirred patriotic feelings among the public. In addition to historical figures, contemporary events were included in textbooks to educate and mobilize the public. The suicide of Min Young-hwan, a relative of Queen Min and respected high-ranking official, became a major rallying point for members of the public. Min committed suicide after his opposition to the 1905 Ulsa Treaty had failed. His suicide was a symbolic act of defiance, and his death, widely reported in the press, sparked a wave of sympathy for Min and outrage against the forced signing of the treaty. The discovery of the so-called blood bamboos that miraculously sprouted at the site of his death further sensationalized his sacrifice, intensifying anti-Japanese sentiment. The image of Min Young-hwan's portrait, alongside the symbolic blood bamboos, became a potent tool in the nationalistic movement, frequently reproduced in photographs, paintings, and woodblock prints. These images were circulated widely, appearing in newspapers, postcards, and educational materials, ensuring that Min's martyrdom continued to inspire resistance against Japan. An Jung-geun also became a revered martyr after assassinating Ito Hirobumi in 1909. Born into an affluent family, An was influenced by both reformist ideals and Confucian ethics, which shaped his belief in self-sacrifice for a greater cause. After the signing of the 1905 Ulsa Treaty, he became committed to eliminating Ito Hirobumi as a means of saving Korea from Japanese oppression. His assassination of Ito in Harbin, China, led to his arrest and eventual execution, but it also ignited widespread admiration among Koreans and even the Chinese. Photographs of An, both before and after his arrest, became powerful symbols of his martyrdom. Despite Japanese attempts to control and ban the distribution of these images, they were reproduced and circulated both in Korea and abroad. His portraits, especially those showing his severed finger, were sold as photo postcards and prints, fueling nationalistic sentiment. The Japanese initially attempted to demonize An by labeling his portraits with the caption "Vile Korean" and framing his actions as barbaric. However, his image instead became a popular symbol of heroism and patriotism. Even after his execution in 1910, An's image continued to inspire Koreans, reminding them of the collective fight for independence. So far, we've investigated the development of mass print media in Korea and the consumption of popular imagery in the early 20th century. For our next and final session of the week, let's analyze the impact of photography and print media on the arts of early modern Korea.